Hi, hello, good morning everyone. I'm Dr. Harika Kishore. On behalf of Vista's Learning, I'm here as your biology educator. Learning, it's an online education platform which works with an ideology of providing quality education for all. Visit our website www.v-learning.in where you're going to get an access for all the live classes, recorded sessions, and also study materials, concept videos. Moreover, you're going to get this lecture notes in the form of PDFs. And also make sure to get your acquaintance with all the channels available and make sure to subscribe to the channel Vista's Learning Class 11 and 12. If you find this session useful and helpful, click on the like and share this session with your friends. And also don't forget to click on the bell icon so that you are going to get all the upcoming video notifications. Now, let's start out today's session. We are in the discussion of the chapter Biodiversity and Conservation, which comes under the unit Ecology. In the previous session, we have been studying about, we have understood already about what is this biodiversity. And in this session, let's move ahead with the gradients, latitudinal gradients. Let's understand, we already know what is this biodiversity. Bio is nothing but living organisms. Biodiversity means variations, vary in the species at its species level, gene level, that means both species and genus, that is genus level, and also ecological level. So here, let's move ahead with the patterns of biodiversity. Biodiversity can be visualized at different levels like species level, genus level, and ecological level, right? So here, the diversity of plants and animals, that means living organisms, is not uniform. Definitely the distribution is not uniform. Somewhere we can see more distribution of the plants and animals, and in some region we find the distribution of the plants and animals are comparatively less. In the previous session, we have mentioned an important point that in the trophic regions we find the distribution of these plants and more, that is biodiversity is more in tropic regions when compared to the biodiversity that is present in temperate regions. This statement is very, very important, and there are so many hypotheses which has been proposed to explain the statement, where it is given like the biodiversity is more in trophic regions when compared to the biodiversity that is present in temperate regions. Before that, let's understand this latitudinal gradient. Gradient is nothing but differentiation, difference, variation. So if you assume this as a earth, we can find equator which is present in the center, that we already know, right? Here what we find equator, right? With, if we move either on the sides, we can find the poles. Think that this is North Pole, and the other side, that is South Pole. That is what we can say. This latitude will give you the North and South Pole positions of a point that is present in the Earth's surface. So it is divided by the equator, where we can see 0 degrees. When we move towards either of the poles, like it is towards the South Pole or North Pole, we'll get 90 degrees. 0, right? These are all poles. South, think that this is 60 degree south, 90 degree south. Same way, 30 degree, 60 degree, 90 degrees, and this is towards North Pole. So here we can see more biodiversity that is located near to the equator. And there are so many explanations to prove that the biodiversity is more in tropic region when compared to temperate regions. Now here, the biodiversity of the plants and animals is not uniform. It's not uniform. This is important. Uniform distribution of living organisms never exists. The diversity of the plants and animals, what we can call it as a living organisms, that is what we denoted it with bio, is not uniform throughout the world but shows a rather uneven distribution. That is what we say that tropical regions shows more biodiversity. This is very, very important when compared to temperate region biodiversity. We can see less biodiversity that is present in temperate regions and more biodiversity that is present in the tropical regions. Now, for many group of animals and plants, there are interesting patterns in the biodiversity. We can see they are arranged in different patterns. That is what we are calling it as a patterns of biodiversity. The most well known being the latitudinal gradient. Gradient is nothing but differentiation. That means more biodiversity can be seen in one area when compared to the diversity that is present in the another regions. In a diversity, let's understand what is this latitudinal gradient. So that is what we already said, that near the equator, we take this as a equator, right? This line is our equator, right? 90 degrees south, 90 degrees north, 30 degrees north, 60 degrees north. Same way here also, 30 degrees south, 60 degrees south and 90 degrees south. This is South Pole and this is North Pole. This is just for your understanding. What is this latitudinal gradient? So here, in general, the species diversity decreases as we move away, either towards the poles. Maybe it is towards South Pole or maybe it is towards North Pole. If we are moving away from equator, we can see decrease in the species biodiversity. This is very, very important. See, this is the referral point, equator. If you start moving towards North Pole or if you start moving towards South Pole, either in these two cases, we can see there is a decrease in the species diversity. Species diversity decreases. That means more species diversity is present towards the equator, which is present near the equator. That means here more species diversity. If we are starting to travel towards the south, there is a decrease in the species diversity. And also from the equator, if you start traveling towards the North Pole, then also species diversity decreases. Here also it is decreasing, and if we move close to the decreases. See, so that is how the decrease in species diversity takes place when we move from the equator towards either of the poles. Whether we are moving close to the South Pole or whether we are moving close to the North Pole, in both the cases, there is a decrease in the species diversity. This is very, very important. Decrease in species diversity if we move from equator towards poles. That means more diversity is present near to the equator, with very few exceptions. For this statement, there are very few exceptions where tropics, latitudinal range of 23.5 towards North Pole to 23.5 towards South Pole, harbors more species than the temperate or polar regions. This is what we already say, that the tropic regions will always have more species diversity that when compared to the temperate areas, right? Now, as we already said, that the statement which is already clear is the species diversity is more in the equator. If we start moving from the equator towards either of the poles, there is a decrease in the species diversity. So here, Colombia located near the equator. We know that near the equator, more species diversity. This we already understood. Has nearly 1400 species of birds. And this is near equator. Let's think this is a near equator. So, Colombia, more species diversity, number is more. So 1400 species of birds. While Newark, this is while we are moving towards the pole, towards the North Pole at 41 degrees. 41 degrees North Pole has 105 species. So it is decreasing. See, it's already started decreasing from 1400 to 105. So the Colombia is located near the equator, where we can see more species diversity, and the example is given in terms of bird species diversity, where 1400 bird species are present towards the that means located in the Colombia, which is present near the equator. If we start either of the poles, what we said, right? Here we started to move towards North Pole, that is 41 degrees north, where in the Newark we find it is only 105. And Greenland, again we are closely moving towards the north itself. That means 90 degrees of the north, that is 71 degrees. Here it is much reduced to 56 species. So here 56 species. So this is in Newark and this is in Greenland. Simple. We already given the statement like in the equator we find more species diversity. If we move close to either of the poles, no matter whether it is we are moving close to the North Pole or whether we are moving close to the South Pole, there is a decrease in the species biodiversity. That is what it has happened in this example. In Colombia, which is present in the equator, we find 1400 species more biodiversity, more bird species biodiversity. If we move close to the North Pole, starting where 41, that is Newark, North Pole, we find only 105. Still moving towards the North Pole, that is Greenland, we find 56. So the number has been reduced from 1400, 105, and finally it reaches to 56 bird species. That is what we can come to understanding, that the species diversity is more in the equator, and if you move either of the poles, close to either of the poles, there is a decrease in the species biodiversity. Now, India, which much of its land area, terrestrial land area in the tropical latitudes has more than this. We already got an information like tropical regions, tropical areas, tropical latitudes will have more species biodiversity when compared to the temperates. So here has more than 1200 species of birds. Right? Moving on to. So here, a forest, as we already know that, simple tropical region, more species diversity. Remember this. This is simple to understand then. Temperate region, less species diversity. Okay, here, a forest in a tropical region like Ecuador, this is tropical. According to our statement, it has to have more species diversity. Look at here, up to 10 times as many species of vascular plants. What do you mean by vascular plants? Vascular plants which can transport their water, minerals by means of phloem and well-developed xylem elements. So here lignified and as well as non-lignified tissues are present, which is useful for the transport of the water and minerals, that is the xylem and the phloem system, and also photosynthesis performing tissues are also present. Therefore, we can say these are vascularized plants. They have a well-developed system for conduction, water conducting, mineral conduction systems. So here, 10 times as many species of vascular plants when compared to the forest of equal area. Area is equal, same forest, but equal area of the forest is present in two regions. One is tropic region and other one is temperate regions. In a temperate region, like Midwest of USA. So, Ecuador have more species diversity. That is what we are telling. It consisting of up to 10 times as many species of vascular plants that are present in the same area in the forest that is located in temperate regions, right? So the statement here is an example which supports our statement that more species diversity is present in the tropical regions when compared to the species diversity that is present in temperate regions. Now, so here, as we already know that tropical region has more species diversity. And this species diversification is supported by this statement where they are stating that the largely tropical Amazonian rainforest in South America has the greatest, very great biodiversification. Greatest biodiversity, that is what we tell it as a more species diversity on the earth. It is a home to more than, this is the list of the species, diversified species, which goes like 40,000 species of plants, 3,000 species of fishes, 1,300 species of birds, 427 species of mammals, 427 species of amphibians, 378 species of reptiles, and of more than 125,000 invertebrates, and much more insect species. Scientists estimates that in this rainforest, Amazon rainforest, there might be at least 2 million insect species waiting to be discovered and described. That means name, giving name, that means nomenclature, and giving is taxonomic position, that is discovering and describing. So this is how all the numericals will suggest you the richest, greatest biodiversity that is present in the Amazon rainforest. That is the statement we already said. Tropical regions have more species diversity, right? So here, to explain this statement, why this is happening, why more species we can able to find only in the tropical regions when compared to the temperate regions. Why not temperate regions? Why the temperate regions are having less biodiversity when compared to the tropical regions? For that, ecologists, evolutionary biologists have proposed various hypotheses, and some of the hypotheses, some important ones are here. This is all the hypotheses proposed to explain why the species diversity is more in tropical region when compared to the biodiversity that is present in temperate regions. we have to remember that tropical regions have more species diversity. And to explain that, these are the list of the hypotheses. In that, the first one is speciation. Speciation. It's nothing but this is the evolutionary process by which new species has been added. That means addition of new species. Addition of new species means more species diversity. That is species diversification. So here, speciation, it's generally a function of unit. Function of, and that unit is time here. Always, addition of the species and increase of species biodiversity, it's all is the function of time. By the time passes. There is as the time passes, as the years are coming, all these new years, that means as the time is coming up, there is an addition of the new species. That is what we are telling, that speciation is generally a function of unit. So here, and that unit is function of time here. And like temperate regions, we can't see constant conditions. Consistency, persistence can't be maintained by the temperate regions. There is a change. Always these temperate regions are subjected to changes. That is what we are telling here. Unlike temperate regions, which are subject to frequent glaciations. What do you mean by glaciations? Glaciations where we can see the land is covered by the glaciers. That is nothing but ice sheets. That means the temperature is not constant here. That is maybe one of the reason why the speciation varies low in temperate regions when compared to the rate of the speciation that is happening in the tropical regions. In the past, tropical latitudes have remained relatively undisturbed. Disturbed conditions can be seen in the case of temperate regions, and therefore due to these disturbances, there is no chance to maintain the constant environment. As the disturbances is happening, there is no more vegetation, that means more diversity that is happening in the case of species. So here, if you come to the tropical regions where we can see it remains relatively undisturbed. That means it can be able to maintain the constant climatic environmental conditions. Therefore, and this consistency and this relatively unstable state has been maintained since millions of years, and thus there is a possibility for the long evolutionary time for species diversification. So all this will give the one of the hypothesis, and that one of the hypothesis is speciation. Speciation is made possible in the tropical regions because it is relatively remained undisturbed for millions of years. Therefore, it is possible for species diversification. Therefore, there is a long evolutionary time for the species for diversifying. This is one hypothesis. Now, in that, tropical environments, unlike temperate ones, are less seasonal. See, less seasonal means less changes. Less changes means more stable, more constant. More constant means more species diversity. Relatively more constant and predictable. We can predict. The temperatures are all more or less they are maintained constantly. Therefore, the species will well adapted to the habitats, and therefore the diversification is made possible in the case of tropical regions, and this is not will happen in the case of temperate regions. Now, such constant environments promotes niche specializations. That means comfortable adaptations to the habitat. Therefore, once the habitat is set, once the habitat is supportive, then the species can go for its diversification. So, leads to the greater species diversity, right? And another hypothesis. This may be also a reason because we have more cellular energy that is available to the tropical regions. So here, there is more solar energy available to the tropic areas when compared to the temperate areas, which contributes to higher productivity. We know that the solar energy is the ultimate source for the producers. That means nothing but plants to produce the photosynthesis. Once a photosynthesis is produced, that means it is producing biomass, and this biomass has been transferred from the producers to the consumers. This is all we already know. That means in turn, this availability of the solar energy is the main reason that is going to contribute to the higher productivity. Higher productivity. More plants, that means it will support the growth of more consumers. More consumers, more plants, more producers, that means more diversity, that is biodiversity. Simple. This in turn might contribute indirectly to greater species diversity. That means biodiversity. Right? Now, so here, during pioneering and extensive exploration is traveling to an unfamiliar area to learn more about it. Exploring a new lands. In the wilderness out of South American jungles, forests, the great German naturalist, geographer Alexander von Humboldt. He is a scientist, he is a naturalist. While he is exploring the forest lands that are present in South America, he came to understand this statement. His observations are very, very important. Observe that within a region, species richness increases with increasing explored area. If you explore more area, there is a increase in species richness, but it have a limit. But only up to limit. To make you understand this observation, see, this is an area. Let's think this is an area. We are exploring this area. That means we are exploring particular in this area, what are all the species that are present. We are understanding the richness of the species. So if you explore this area, as we are exploring this, the species richness will increase. We increase this, we explore a new little bit more area. Started to explore a little more area. As we increase the area, still species richness also increases. Further we increased our explored area. Here also we can see an increase in species richness. Still we increases the explored area, then the species area will decrease. Up to certain limit, there is an increase in the species richness as we increase the area explored. But after certain limit, there is no possibility of increasing the richness in the species. That is his observation. To make you understand this observation, here what is observed, now try to understand the sentences with this explanation. Here he observed within an area, within a region, species richness increases. Species richness increases with increasing explored area. Explored means unfamiliar area, we traveled through it to learn more about it. So if you increase the explored area, the species diversity also keeps on increasing, but there is a limit. But only within the limit, but only up to a limit. If you cross the limit, then there is no increase in the species richness. That is what his observation was. Now, and this is explained in the by the means of this graph. Let's understand the relation between species and area. Species richness and area. In fact, the fact between the relation which exists between the species richness and area. The relation between species richness and area for a wide variety of taxa. And the species which includes angiosperm plants, birds, bats, freshwater fishes, turns out to be rectangular hyperbola. This is your rectangular hyperbola. See, if you start plotting a graph taking area versus species richness, this species richness will increase with the area, and it will keeps on increasing, and it reaches to a certain point where there is no further increase in the species richness, though we increase the area. That is what we'll get, this rectangular hyperbola, which is represented by an equation S is equal to CAZ. This is for rectangular hyperbola. If we take logs on either sides, look at here, log S is equal to CA, right? Log C plus log A, but to the power will come in the front, Z log A. This is an equation for straight line. So here we can understand the observation which was given already by Alexander Venn. If we increase the area, and there is an increase in species richness. Further we increase the area, see, we keep on increasing the area, right? There is an increase in the species richness. Here it is increased, here it is further increased, right? Again, we increase the area, there is an increase in the species richness too. This is an increase, this is an increase. We are still going beyond the new explored areas, and there is an increase. Still increased. So this is how we are increasing the area. See, there is a less increase in the, this is what the difference is between the previous explored area and the new one. Still we increase the area, there in which this line is coming too closer. That means the species richness is not more when compared to the previous conditions. Still we further increased. And this will go very, very close to each other, close to each other, close to each other. That means the increase in the species richness is reducing, That is what he stated his observation by, only up to a limit, only up to a limit. Now, as this is very difficult to demarcate, to differentiate, this equation which is given for this rectangular hyperbola was given to a straight line, right? Why they have given straight line? Straight line just because log to log scale, where we can get clear points, clear separation between one to another point when compared to the rectangular hyperbola. So here, as we already know, on a logarithmic scale, the relationship is a straight line, which is described by the equation. This is an equation for rectangular hyperbola, and this is an equation for straight line. And what are the terms that are coming here? S is for species richness. That is what we have taken here. What's this area? That is A. Coming to Z, this is the slope of the line. This is important. Slope of the line. Regression coefficient. And C is the y-intercept. Let's understand more about the Z. Z is important here. That is the slope of the line. Here, ecologists have described that the value of the Z falls in the range of 0.1 to 0.2. 0.1 to 0.2. Remember this, regardless of the taxonomic group or the regions, whether it is temperate regions or tropic regions, whether it is the plants in Britain or birds in California or mollusks in New York State, the slope of the regression lines are amazingly similar, which falls in between 0.1 to 0.2. Now here, but if you analyze the species area relationship among very large areas, that is entire continent, this is important, entire continent, you will find the slope of line will be much steeper and the range falls between 0.6 to 1.2. Now, for an example, take for an example that frugivorous means which feeds on the fruits. So, fruit-eating birds and mammals in the tropical forest of different continents, the slope is found to be 1.15, which falls in this range, right? Now, .15. Now, okay, this is all about the patterns of biodiversity. Let's move ahead with understanding the importance of species diversity to an ecosystem. How the species diversity is important to maintain the healthy ecosystem. How each and every species that is present in the diversified ecosystem that are useful to maintain the healthy ecosystem itself. Let's have a question here. Does the number of the species, what are the number of the species? Whether it is in tens, hundreds or thousands, whether the number of the species in a community really matters to the functioning of the ecosystem. Functioning is nothing but your productivity, decompositions, energy flow, right? Nutrient cycling, these are all the functions of the ecosystem. To perform all these functions of the ecosystem, whether the number of the species really matters. This is a question for which ecologists have not been able to give a definite answer, like consolidated answer, whether it is yes or whether it is no. Why? Because for many decades, ecologists believe that communities with more species, that means more species diversity, generally tends to be more stable than those with the less species. For example, ecosystem A, right? Ecosystem B. Here we find more species, and here we find less species. For decades together, ecologists believe that ecosystem with more species is having more stability. This ecosystem is more stable when compared to this ecosystem. So here, for many decades, ecologists believe that communities with more species generally tend to be more stable than those with less species. That means communities with less species. Now, what exactly is stability for the biological community? What do you mean by stable biological community? What exactly the stability matters for this biological community? Let's understand. A stable community should not show too much of variations in terms of its productivity, which is considered as a function of ecosystem. And there shouldn't be too much of variation in terms of this productivity from one year to another year, right? The more or less the productivity should be maintained constant towards the years, like no matter whether it is this year or next year or coming up next year, the productivity has to be maintained constantly. It must be either resistant is nothing but stable, right? Resistant or resilient to occasional disturbances. It has to be constant to the disturbances that are coming either the way of natural disturbances or by means of man-made disturbances. Natural disturbances are nothing but earthquake, floods, right? Heavy rainfalls, and even forest fires due to deforestation, all these things, disturbances. Or for all the disturbances, this ecosystem has to be constant, resistant. It has to have a resistance towards all these changes. And it must also be resistant, that means it has to be constant to invasion of alien. Alien is nothing but foreign species. For example, Parthenium, carrot grass, even excuse me, water hyacinth. These are the invasives which comes from the outside, that is the exotic plants. As they invasive means extensively growing very faster, quick growing plants, they reach to such a level where it is going to compete with the already existing species, right, in that particular habitat. That is what we call it as an invasive, very fast growing, quickly growing plants. As it is quickly growing, it definitely going to compete with the existing species. And for all these things, the ecosystem or the community has to be constant. That is what we can say that particular biological community is stable. Now, we don't know how this attributes means being stable to the disturbances that are created by the natural means or man-made, and being stable for all the invasive alien species that is coming to the community. All these attributes, in what way that are going to link to the species richness in the community, is completely unknown. Now, for that, but David Tillman, he made an experiment by taking a long-term ecosystem experiments using outdoor plots, provides some tentative, subjected to change, some tentative answers for this question. How all these attributes are going to link to the species richness in the community. Now, let's understand. David Tillman found that plots with species shows less year-to-year variation. Less year-to-year variation means stable, constant productivity, means constant total biomass. Shows less year-to-year variation in total biomass. That means it is maintaining constant biomass. If the constant biomass is being maintained, then the next tropical level will always get the transfer of the energy. That is, energy flow is maintained constant. He also showed that in his experiment, increased diversity contributed to higher productivity. So here, although we may not understand completely how species richness contributes to the well-being of an ecosystem, and also we know enough to realize that rich biodiversity, species biodiversity, is not only essential for maintaining the healthy ecosystem, it's not only essential for ecosystem health, but also it is imperative, vital, critically important for a very survival of the human race on this planet. See, species diversity is not only needed to maintain healthy ecosystem, but it is immediate, crucially important for human race survival on this planet. Now, at the time when we are losing species, when we are, see, there is an extinct of a single species. The species is no more in the existence, that is extinct species. One species is being extincted. In what way it is going to be a matter for the stability of the ecosystem, for the stability of the biological community? At an alarming pace, pace is nothing but speed. One might ask, does it really matters to us if a few species become extinct? If one or two species are become extinct, in what way they are going to influence the stability of the ecosystem or influence the stability of the biological community? Would Western Ghats ecosystem have less functional if one of its species, tree frog species, it is a frog species, it's a frog which spends most of its time lifespan, most of the lifespan on the tree, that is what we call it as a tree frog species. If one tree frog species is lost forever, that is extincted, then in what way this Western Ghat ecosystem is being suffered by the last of this single tree frog species? So for that, how is our quality of life affected if, say, instead of 20,000 we have only 15,000 species of ants? We have ants, right? But there is a decrease in the number. From 20,000 to it dropped down to the 15,000. That means 5,000 species of the ants have been lost forever on this earth. If that is the condition, in what way our life is going to be affected by this loss? To explain that, all this is just one question. In what way a few species, if they go lost forever, if they go extincted, in that case, how it is going to influence the stability of the ecosystem? Now, there are no direct answers for this question, for such a naive questions, but we can develop a proper perspective through a analogy. That means a study where we compare one thing with other for a better understanding, for a better explanation. See here, and that analogy is the Rivet-Popper hypothesis. What is this Rivet-Popper hypothesis? Is saying to give you a better understanding of how a fewer species, if lost forever, that is going to influence the life on this ecosystem. And this hypothesis was used by Stanford ecologist Paul Ehrlich. Now, in an airplane, as we already said that this is all an analogy. That is a study by which we are comparing one with another. Here we are comparing our ecosystem. We are comparing ecosystem with airplane. And the species which are present in this ecosystem with Rivet. rivets. What do you mean by rivets? Rivets are nothing but screws or bolts. Rivets are nothing but bolts or screws. All parts are joined together using thousands of rivets. In an airplane, all the parts like wings, seats, windows, the interiors, everything, they will fixed by using small rivets, bolts, right? In this example, we compare the whole airplane with an ecosystem and all the rivets which have been used to assemble all the parts that are present in the airplane with the species that are present in the ecosystem. This is a comparison. Here, if you think that each and every passenger, we have a plane. Think that this is the plane and we have bolts here, screws here, rivets, right? That will fix each and every parts, wings, everything. Here, think that each and every passenger which is who are traveling by using this airways, if ever passengers traveling in it starts to popping, removing one nut or bolt or rivet, each and every passenger have removed one rivet to and they have taken that rivet to their homes. That means we lost one rivet. In this example, one rivet is one species, right? Causing a species to become extinct. That means here in our ecosystem, each species is compared to each rivet. One rivet loss is one species loss in the ecosystem. What happened? Here, it may not affect that much initially because it may be some much less important rivets which fixes the windows or which fixes the seats. It is not going to show an immediate effect to the plane's stability. Here, it may not affect flight safety initially. Proper functioning of the ecosystem. This flight safety is nothing but we compared with the proper functionality of the ecosystem. If we remove one species, it is nothing going to deal with the functioning of the ecosystem. If we keep on removing the species, if we keep on there is a loss in the continuous race of the species, that means every time there is a loss in the species, then it is going to show the effect. That is going to show some great effect towards the functionality of the ecosystem. So here, but as more and more rivets are nothing but species here, are removed, each and every passenger is removing one rivet, the plane become dangerously weak over a period of time. That is what happening in the case of ecosystem 2. Furthermore, which rivet is removed may also be critical. Here, loss of rivets on the wings immediately going to show an effect on the movement of the wings. That is how it affects the safety of the plane, safety of the flight. That is what the rivets on the wings are compared to key species. That means very important species. That means producers. Key species that drive major ecosystem functions is obviously more serious threat to the flight safety. Flight safety is nothing but the functionality of the ecosystem. Then loss of few rivets on the seats or windows inside the plane. That means all this comparative study is made you understand that initially if one species is lost, there is no much loss that is happening to the functionality of the ecosystem. But as over a time, as the species are being extincted after extinction, it at some point it is going to show a very critical condition, dangerously weakened condition, which is going to show its effect on the functionality of the ecosystem. And another point, If the species is playing a very important role in the ecosystem, then that is also very important, that which species is going to be lost forever, which species is going to be extincted. If that extincted species is very important species, that is key species, definitely it is going to show its effect on the functionality of the ecosystem, right? Now, yeah, that is it. So in this class, we discussed about the pattern of the biodiversity, and also we had have a discussion about the relationship between the species richness versus area. That is it for today's session. Let's catch up in the next session. Until then, keep learning with V Learning. Thank you.